I'm Jean-François. I'm from the Boston Consulting Group. You probably heard about us. We are consultants, so really our job is really to advise our corporate clients. We work for the Fortune 500 multinationals, and we really think that we have a role to play to connect them to the quantum ecosystem and the other way around. We are really privileged to work with these large companies and help them with their quantum journey. And we've been involved as consultants since 6 years now. We started our first report on BCG.com in 2018, and we've been publishing about 15 publications so far. And I'm going to talk about some of our, past forecasts and what we think about how do we want to revise it based on the latest, news that are coming all the time on quantum. Like you look at this week alone with Google, right? So in quantum, I've been there for 6 years. I live in a superposition of being optimist and being pessimist. I don't know for you guys, but for, after a conference like this, I really come out energized, and then I see some customers and they always tell me like, okay, quantum is good, but where is the ROI? And then I go back into the pessimist mode and back and forth. Right. So the question is, where are we heading? So thanks to Bob, we have very optimistic forecast. We still have a danger of a quantum winter. And I think at the end of the day, the question that we want to ask ourselves is, what are the key factors that we want to look at to predict the demand? And for me, the key judge at the end of the day is going to be around use cases. Right. And so we published 3 years ago, we published a paper where we have a library of about 100 use cases. We have quantified each one of them. We have also, on that library, we have like the algorithm that we suspect will be used to solve it. And we have a rough timeline that we update on a regular basis. And we have found value creation for these 100 use cases together to be about $450 billion to $850 billion by 2040. Also, what is interesting about those numbers is a few things. When you see some numbers, especially from our colleagues from McKinsey, but others, be aware to separate the value for the end users, right, and the value for the quantum providers out there. Those are two different numbers. Like, if you were to buy something that gets you value, you wouldn't give the full value to your provider, right? You always keep some for yourself, right? And that's typically when you do an IT project calculation, typically the corporate people that buy, they typically set aside 20% for like the IT provider part. They also have change management costs, right, on top of it. They have also integration costs. So that's an average. Obviously, that number will change over time because right now it's pretty high and it will go down. But basically, be aware. We don't see quantum computing to be $1 trillion market. It's going to be more. It's close to $1 trillion value. Yes. The market, which is like the dark green number that you see here, would be like more than $100 billion, which, keep in mind, is a lot. Because if you compare to the current HPC market, it's actually quite comparable. And HPC has taken decades to be created. It's used everywhere. It's used in automotive, in aerospace, in defense, in a lot of places, in banks. So actually, a good way to check our number is to check whether it's, comparable to HPC, because when you look at the use cases, a lot of the use cases of quantum, they overlap pretty well with HPC, with some exceptions. Of course, after 2040, I've been in technology for a long time. We might have a quantum processor in our iPhone and maybe some use cases that we don't know yet. But for the vast majority of the use cases that we know today, they are very close to the HPC world. So that's why it's a good comparison to check that if the numbers are correct. So in 2021, that was what we published. So basically, we had 3 periods. The 3 periods are still there. NISQ. The next one we call broad quantum advantage. I mean, we could call it quantum advantage. It really depends on how you want to spell it. For us, quantum advantage is the first time we'll have like an economical benefit for a customer. Something he can really say it's actually better from an economical standpoint compared to something he's doing right now. So the free periods are there, right? And we are currently in NISQ, as you know. And spoiler alert, we will in the paper we published this year, we have revised our NISQ prediction for the value creation of the end users a lot, because as you know, NISQ is disappointing. And the main reason I'm going to go after a little bit in more detail, but one of the main reasons is actually the get depth. Fidelities have not improved that much, and it's normal because the investors were asking qubits, so companies deliver qubits, but the fidelities have remained pretty, at most 99.9, and you can make the calculation with those fidelities. You can do a few, 1,000 gates, 10,000 gates, but no more. So it's very shallow circuits. And you can, I'm not a mathematician, but you could prove with 1,000 gates you can't do much, right? It's not enough to create a good advantage. So that's the main deception of NISQ. I think it was not necessarily on the number of qubits, but the fact that fidelities have mostly stayed stable. They have not increased a lot, actually, not as fast as qubit. So Bob was just before us, and we use Bob's estimates, and you can see we are in complete agreement with Bob's estimates. So we'll have close to a $1 billion market this year, and it will continue to increase. What is new, though, is the number that you see on the right-hand side, and it's based on our experience talking to government customers, talking to quantum providers. It's really like a rough triangulation of a market, but you could see it in Bob's slides, actually. You have to keep in mind that the main buyer of quantum technology today, by relatively far, is the public sector in general, right? When you have an HPC center buying a quantum computer, it's basically taxpayer money. National labs, same, etc., etc. And it's to be expected, right? It's to be expected that when a technology is very early, like quantum, think about chips, think about GPS, think about the internet. They all started as government, the first user was actually the government. So it makes sense that they are the main buyers right now. And also it makes sense because we all know that, and we saw the UK government, we saw the Denmark government and many others, there are national programs, there is national money, right? In the US, it's the NQI, right? And this money goes somewhere. Actually, it goes there, right? And they're still responsible for some of the part of the growth. And for example, you could see that this year, the market has moved a lot towards hardware buying, right? It was half of the market a few years ago, and I think it's much higher right now. And because there are people buying hardware. Honestly, between you and me, a lot of this hardware they are buying and that are delivered, you could simulate not on your laptop, but on a big enough computer, right? We know that we can simulate perfectly close to 50 qubits, right? Much faster, by the way, fully logical qubits, full connectivity, and you can run you can do trillion gates, no problem, right? So the best quantum computer right now is still a classical simulation. But so these buyers, they are buying to support the industry, to test. That's why they are called test beds and stuff. So that makes sense. Then you still have what I call the leading corporates. So really corporates that are leader in their sector. So usually not the number one and number two of a sector, but the number one usually thinks himself as an innovator, and that's our clients typically. And they want to be at the forefront. And for example, take BMW in automotive, right? And they have robust quantum programs that run in the multiple of millions of dollars, each of them. And there are about more than 50 of these big super users out there that have quantum programs at the corporate level. But they don't buy hardware. They might rent hardware on the cloud to do, at the end of the paper, right, to validate the results. But they will not buy hardware itself, right? And then what I call supply chain, so it's basically quantum computing buying something from another. For example, Rigetti buying a Blue Force fridge, right? For example, or IBM buying Q-Control software. So that appears here. So just to avoid double counting, that's why I put them here. All right. So when we do a roadmap, we look at two things, right? The value is going to be created, and of course, when, right? And so that's the exercise we did 3 years ago. Again, we updated it, and it's available on bcg.com. We published it in July. So how we did this 100 use cases list and how we evaluated them, we basically had, to evaluate those use cases, we categorize the use cases into 3 categories. So the first category is what we call optimal. So what is optimal is a use case that does better than current algorithm. And the fact is, you can do logistics today, to the point of the example of Bob. You can do logistics. You can run NP complete problem today, of course, fortunately, because we have approximate solutions. The N economy works thanks to these solutions, so we can find optimal logistical route. We can price complex options that use using Monte Carlo techniques. We can do these things even though we know we don't have a perfect answer. And when we compute the value of these algorithms, we should avoid the trap of measuring the absolute value of the algorithm. No, what we need to do is to measure the delta between the current classical algorithm, which is widely used and has been used for some time for decades, and the perfect algorithm that will, for example, if I take option pricing, that will give you the exact price of an option instead of an approximate answer, right? The next category of use cases, they are interesting because these ones, they usually don't have a big competition. They have with AI, we'll talk about it later, but we can take their value in absolute number. So for example, everything related to material science, chemistry, of course, factoring primes, right? And in our forecast, I was mentioning there will be use cases that we don't know yet. And so we have looked at past revolutions. For example, when iPhone was invented, nobody thought that Uber would be a use case. Nobody thought about that, right? So we have put aside some use cases that we don't know, right? To be complete, actually. And so that's for the value and how we calculated it. Now, when we look at the timeline, so when 3 years ago when we did the timeline, we looked at basically 4 factors. One is hardware performance, and when you look at the hardware performance, it has been doubling nicely every 1 or 2 years. And so the forecast is okay. The only thing is that we hoped that the fidelities would improve more than they did. And as I said, fidelities are a problem because we have very, very shallow circuits today, and that's the main limitation of NISQ, I think. Software performance, we were hoping 3 years ago that we would find a lot of new algorithms and would have a lot more innovation there. I think we've been disappointed. And I think Scott Aronson talk this morning, he basically validates that we are still, when you look at the main algorithms that have been found, most of the latest big ones were like 10 years ago. So we still need to find, like with VQE and, and so we still need to find new algorithms. And of course, that's a call for people in the room. We really need to work on finding new algorithms because for a long time, the hardware will still be the bottleneck, but very quickly, once we'll have the machines, the bottleneck now will be the software. So we need new type of software that use the hardware properly, and that's still a challenge, I think. We were hoping that classical would not come into some areas. So for example, we were a little bit disappointing for Quantum when Google came up with AlphaFold and then AlphaFold 2. We really thought that it was a use case. So you know what AlphaFold does, by the way, right? It predicts protein folding. So you give a sequence of peptides to the machine, and it will basically tell you the 3D geometry of it, right? And it's super useful in drug discovery because what you want to do at some point, especially at the level of proteins, you're basically doing docking in 3D. So you're looking at the shape, and you see if something can dock. And so it's actually useful for pharma companies. And we thought it would be only reserved for quantum, but so AI has been able to take some of the value, not all the value, I'll come to it later, but the competition was a little bit more stronger than we thought. And last problem, I think, and it's something that I want to point out to this audience, is that IT, I come from technology, and it's typically called IT. The first I of IT is information, right? The main problem we still have with quantum computers is that you always start with vectors of 0, and so the only data you can load into the program is through the program itself, right? That's why, by the way, 1,000 gates is not enough, right? If we could load data, we could open up a lot of use cases. That would be better than started with a vector of zeros. And for example, if we want to do LLMs, we need to load data. That's the only way. Because as you know, quantum is slow and small data in, small data out for the moment. We need to be able to load data. When we did the forecast 3 years ago, there were some techniques that were interesting to load data, actually some from QCware, but unfortunately, they don't really scale. So that's a problem. So also what has changed in the past 3 years is that we have now resource estimation science with us. When we did the first forecast, we did it with experts, and there was no nice way to quantify the number of gates. And thanks to Matthias Treuer at Microsoft and a lot of other people, now we have a science to really measure what an algorithm takes, so you can look it on metrics.info. I really like what they do as part of a unitary fund. They update it on a real-time basis, so it might already have changed since I took that picture, right? But what is cool is that it shows you where you need to be, right? And for example, when John Preskill mentioned we will be soon at the Mecha Coop, era. Look at that line, right? And this is this line. So we can still do relatively trivial things. The cool things, for example, in finance, we would require probably 100 million gates. So that's why the number of millions of gates are important. And I love that the UK government was saying we need 1 trillion gates, because with 1 trillion gates we could do a lot of useful things. As I said, not enough innovation in algorithms, so you can see the timeline of the main algorithms. I'm part of jury of hackathons, so I see what the students come up with when they take any problem from corporate. It's always in that list with some modification. Of course, I don't expect students to come up with like a new algorithm on the fly, but I'm just saying that the library that they can pick on is basically that one. Always, and most of the time it's QAOA, like it's one of the favorites. Some of the other favorites is QPE, right? But always come back to to the same algorithms. So as I said, AI is coming after, quantum. But good news for quantum is that AI is as good as the training data set it has, right? It's as good as that. And as you know, for example, if you take the space of materials, proteins, physical things, it's easily 10 to the power of 50. It's a vast, mind-boggling space, sorry. And that's why we are still searching, for example, for superconducting material that have superconducting properties at room temperature. We know it should exist because we already found materials that work at 70 Kelvin or something, right? Which is hot, compared to, but not room temperature, right? So we know it's possible to do better than 0, but room temperature is still eluding us because actually the space we need to explore is so vast. As humans, we have only explored a tiny fraction of it, right? So what I'm trying to say is that the good news for quantum is that the only machine that is able to explore that space and basically provide training data to a classical computer is a quantum computer. So that's really good news. And actually, it's also a way to see the two technologies working together, because for a long time, quantum will still be expensive. So it will probably be more efficient to use it for training than use it for inference. I think. But anyway, that's the cool thing about that. We are talking about such a big space that, yeah, we explored only like some drops, actually. So now, and I think I'm on time, yes. Well, I don't know how I did that, but anyway, I already give you the spoiler alert. So basically our prediction is that NISQ will be much lower in value than we hope it would be. So we are expecting something like a few $100 million of value for the end user before 2019. So there will be narrow use cases. I think we might start to see one next year, for example, talking to some providers. So we might see like a very tiny use case that brings value, and we will see slightly more, coming slowly in the next years. But it's much lower than we hope it would be. But good news is, 3 years ago when we wrote the first article, nobody thought people were still debating whether we could achieve error correction, where we would achieve break-even, right? It was still debated in the community. Now I think we have enough confidence to say that it's going to happen. It's going to happen sooner than we thought. So it probably will be around 2029, the first 100 qubit logical qubit machine with probably at least 1 million gates. And what is good, so that means that the timeline is going to the left on that part. And so basically we are keeping our estimates for the rest, which is good because that means that things will, thanks to error correction, we have a huge hope. And then I'm going to stop there, but of course, what we need to look in the future, we talked about noise, so we need to really think about circuit depth, right? Clock speed will become important because now that we will running into the, let's say, teraflop, operations, then the clock speed will be important because Tera is like a lot of operations. So if it takes, a microsecond per operation, it's going to be very long, right? Connectivity is important, especially when you regard the error correction. So as I told you, I'm a big fan of data loading. So, and also we'll need to work on ROI because my customers are doing ROI calculation. So they take the value for them, they divide by how much it costs them, and still pretty much a gap right now because an hour of quantum computing is a few $1,000 per shot. Sorry, it's not per shot, it's per hour. Versus for classical, you're more looking at 5 cents or something, right? Even though thanks to NVIDIA, it has gone up. So, so we have to thank them sometimes, right? Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thanks, Jean-François.
Yeah.